All right, let's call this meeting to order. If you can we stand for the pledge?
Yes.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thanks everyone for coming. First thing I'd like to do is do some housekeeping. Can you silence all your electronic devices, please? Also, let's be respectful and use G language because this is going to be a family show, okay? And also, please hold any applause till after the meeting. And we need to thank the fire department for for hosting us for today's meeting, okay? So I'm going to introduce the candidates in alphabetical order by their last name. Anne Marie Barney, Charles Bizzello, Alan Silly, Stephen Felton, Stephen Heath, and Amanda Loud. Okay, and I'm Matt Angel. All right, the rules. So each candidate is going to receive 1.5 minutes for an opening statement, 2 minutes to respond to each question, and 2 minutes for a closing statement. All right? So let's start off with opening statement for Charles.
Ready to go? Well, okay, 1.5 minutes is going to be tight, but I want to introduce myself because I've been here a while. You know, I'm the guy from New York. You all know that, right? And actually, to me, I don't come from New York. I come from Long Island. And if you do that, there's a difference. But anyway, I want to take a few minutes. I'm going to have to do this quickly, but I want to give you a sense of where I come from and what I know. And then the story goes like this. I grew up in a town called Glen Cove on the north shore of the island. Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was a very prosperous place to be. It had a significant industrial sector, and it was an easy place to live. The other side of a harbor, there was another town, geographically identical, but different circumstances. It was a mining town. And what do you mine on Long Island? You mine sand, because they needed the sand in New York. And they were a lot less well off because there's not a whole lot of money in sand. I relate to this story because we used to play baseball with the kids from the other side of the harbor. And the way I remember it is that when they came to play with us, when they went to the field, we had to lend them our baseball gloves because they didn't have them. So that's, in my mind, I kind of like, so that anecdote kind of demonstrates the difference. Get to
15 seconds.
What, 15 seconds left already? Okay. We're going to do this over a couple of things, but in the middle of the 1990s, so industry collapses, just like it did here in Ashland. The town I grew up in was in trouble.
All right. I'm sorry, I have to.
All right.
Okay.
We'll finish.
The next person, Stephen Heath.
Well, I arrived in Ashland in 1990 and been an active member of the community, working for the fire department and teaching school at Ashland Elementary. And I have, I am running for the position, a one-year position, because I want to continue to actively support the town of Ashland, and I'm, concerned about economic growth and, rising costs, and how do we go about, cutting things so that, we can do this, provide the services that are needed, but at the same time, give our taxpayers a break.
Okay. All right. Amanda Loud.
Hi, I'm running for trustee of the trust funds unopposed, but this will be my third 3 year as trustee of the trust funds. I was first elected in 2020. I've been a resident of Ashland since 2014. When I was elected in 2020, many of you may know that I discovered some problems with the trust funds. We had 10. We've had one so depleted that we voted on it at a meeting in 2019, I think. No, 2021, 2022, something like that. The Scribner ones to dissolve it and then rename it and change it. But anyway, I'm running again because we still have some stuff at legal that I would like to see come out of legal, some trusts that don't have town's tax ID number on them, things of that nature that we discovered. And I would just like to see things, I guess I'd like to leave with everything cleaned up that I found. So I'm running again, and if anyone is interested in becoming a trustee of the trust fund, I would particularly love to talk to someone who's a
15
retired
seconds.
CPA. Please let me know.
All right. Anne Marie Barney.
Hi, my name's Ann Barney. I have some pretty deep roots in the town. My grandparents lived here their entire lives. They had Barney's Market, so they gave a lot. If anybody was in need, they could go there and they would help them out. My parents, my dad lived in Ashland his entire life. He gave back by being an EMT, a firefighter, helping with youth sports, school sports. I've lived in Ashland my entire life. I worked here at summer camp. I worked as a lifeguard. I've been on different boards and committees here in town. I've raised my children here. And my daughter is now raising her children here. So I have a very important reason to try and keep this town being prosperous and going forward with what we need to do. There's no agenda, just trying to keep the same hometown feeling, but going forward with what we need to do.
Okay, thank you. Alan Silly.
Well, obviously, I had some longer speech in month, but I'll try to keep it to a minute and a half. For the people who know me, I've lived here all my life. My reason for running, which I was not planning on doing, because people asked me to run. They wanted to see change for the better. They weren't happy with what they saw. That's what they're telling me. So against my better judgment, with permission from my wife, I'm here today. I will get into the other facts. Just the thing of it is, I've been working or been part of this town in some form or another for 40 years, starting in 1986 as your building inspector. And I thought I was done 3 years ago when I got off the select board at that time. But I'm willing to sacrifice myself one more time to serve this town. Thank you.
We're gonna miss. Want to do that again, Alan?
And finally, Stephen Felton.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the group for putting this together and thank all of you for being here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you. I've been in Ashland for about 23 years with my wife, who's back there, and I have 3 boys that live in different states in New England, all pretty much grown now. In the 23 years I've been here, I've been involved in different areas of Ashland politics through, from 2014 to 2017, I was on the select board when we created the concept of capital reserves and capital improvement programs to try to plan for our longer term needs. I've been on the budget committee. I was all on the capital improvements program committee. I was on the, and I've been on the school board for probably the last 5 or 6 years. So I have a pretty deep roots in Ashland, and I retired recently in June of this past year, and I felt like I got a little bit more time in my hands, and I see a lot of opportunity that we have here in Ashland, so I wanted to try to take my expertise that I have and ask for your vote for a 3-year term for a select board. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to ask 3 questions, and we're going to rotate the order. So we started off with Charles, so this time we're going to start off with Steve Heath, okay? And the first question is, what are your thoughts on the role of transparency and accountability in local government?
Well, I think transparency is a key issue. You know, as somebody mentioned previously, you know, that we aren't running because we have agendas. I'm not running because I have an agenda. And I think the key is in you know, open communication. I would like to encourage more citizens to participate in meetings, coming to meetings like, you know, like regular select board meetings. A lot of times they're pretty sparsely attended, and I think, you know, it makes it more productive for the people on the board to hear a wider range of opinions, to be able to consider a lot of different things. So I think public input is crucial. And again, transparency is a key part of that. And so, and the other bit of it is accountability.
Yes, that's correct.
Accountability is accepting responsibility for what you've done. And I think that public officials should be accountable and should be able to explain why they believed in a certain thing and went in a certain direction or voted a certain way. And, you know, I think that's critical.
Okay. Same question for Amanda. What are your thoughts on the role of transparency and accountability in local government?
I can say that we trustees of the trust fund always post our meetings. We meet 4 times a year, quarterly. Posted both on the website as well as outside town hall. And we also take minutes and post those are posted online as well on the town website. Our job, you know, we are always open to having people come to our meetings. Doesn't happen, but we are always open to that and open to hearing what they say. Our job is very limited and protracted by the laws of the state of New Hampshire, in that we are just to make sure that the checks that the town wants to pay, you know, these bills, do align with the warrant articles that those funds were set aside to do. And we write the checks. That's our job. So, you know, so far I have not been handed a request for a check that did not align with the warrant article, but we just make sure, for example, that when we're paying off for road paving, for example, that it's coming out of the fund that was set aside for road paving and not for a fund that was maybe set aside for improvements to town hall or something. You see what I'm saying? Not that I think there would ever have been an intentional, you know, mistake like that from the Board of Selectmen, you know, or finance, but just that we're just that extra check and balance on the system to be sure that the money's being used as you voted to have it used.
All right. Anne-Marie, what are your thoughts on the role of transparency and accountability in local government?
Thank you for that question. It's a very good question to talk about. And transparency is very important. Sometimes if things aren't you don't make them transparent to the people immediately and from the get-go, a very, very good idea could take a wrong turn. We need to make sure everybody's aware of what's going on from step 1 in anything, boards, committees, all of us. And take accountability. If this is what you want to do, have an idea for it. Don't bring it out too early, because people need to know how you plan on doing this, what you can do to make this happen. So what I urge everybody that are on any boards and committees, definitely we need you out there helping, doing things, but let's be transparent. Let's bring them up front to everybody on every board and every committee as we go. A select few can't do it and have it be good for the whole town.
Okay. Alan, what are your thoughts on the role of transparency and accountability in local government?
Well, this is where it gets hard when you're almost last at coming up with good answers. The biggest thing for transparency is the job that we do, giving out the information beforehand when things are discussed. My feeling is that the boards have done a pretty good job, but we always find out something after the fact. And I think that's one of the biggest things that happens. If you don't have the information up front, let alone the correct information, things do not go well. So what I would do in the future is make sure that information gets out there in a timely fashion, getting on an agenda so that people know what they might want to go to a meeting for to ask their questions.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Felton,
Thank you.
do you want me, let me
No,
say the question again. What is
No,
your
go
thoughts on the role of transparency and accountability in local
Got
government?
it. Transparency and accountability.
Okay.
Those are absolutely critical, and probably even more critical when you're dealing with municipal government, because your customers are the residents, and there are many of them. So we need to find ways to make sure that we can get the information out as effectively as possible, because everyone digests and gets information in different ways. Some of the things that I'm sure are already in place and things that I think would be important to that is making sure that as we have our public meetings, they're obviously open, and then there's some process within those public meetings to be able to get feedback from the public at those meetings on particular topics. Making sure that, which I think they are now, the meetings are all recorded, so you can go back and look at them on video. Making sure for all the things that we do with the municipal government, we have a plan and we're tracking our progress, and people understand what is that plan. And that plan is something that is put together. I'm not going to get into the master plan and everything else, but it's one big plan, and we need to all be a part of that, and we need to be kept apprised of how things are going and what the timelines are. Make sure our website is kept updated so that people that want to use that can go there and get the information quickly and effectively. And one of the things that I saw recently on the website is like a monthly recap, and I think that's a nice way of consolidating everything so that you could go and maybe expand upon that. So somebody could take a 5 or 10 minute read and really get a good concept of what's been going on for the last 30 days in the town, which may
15
cause them to have
seconds.
questions. Thank you.
All right. And Charles?
I'll defer to the others who all gave great answers, because I'm gonna get back to my story here. We left the story at the town I grew up in. The industrial base collapsed around the 1990s. On the other side of the harbor, the sand mine ran out. So we have 2 towns in total collapse. Now, the towns each had to deal with this, and they came up with different solutions. The town I grew up in said, you know what, we've had it with industry. We're gonna be a bedroom community. And they initiated plans. You know, I know a lot of you are familiar with what's been proposed down in the Mill Pond area. Okay, you take that plan and multiply it by 10. That's where the town I grew up in went. The other side of the harbor, you know, and this is after years of debate, by the way, it wasn't overnight. They said, you know what, we have to change this town because we're not doing well. And so they looked around and they said, you know what we have as an asset? We have a big flat piece of land that used to have the sand mines on it. And they said, you know what, that'll be a great industrial park. And that's the direction they went in. Now, in my town, one of the mantras were, we can't let this town change. It was one of the golden towns of Long Island, and you know, it was a wonderful place to grow up. And so they didn't want change. All right, so let's fast forward now to the present. You can go on Zillow and you can look up the price of a median home. In the town I grew up in, it's similar to New Hampshire, maybe 750,000 or something like that. You know, not Ashland, but New Hampshire. On the other side of the harbor, the median price of a home is 1.4 million, okay? They became much more prosperous. Now, there's an irony to the story that is really the point of why I'm telling you. The town I grew up in that said they wouldn't change, when I go back there to visit, not only did it change, I can't even recognize it from what it was when I
15
grew up.
seconds.
And on the other side, where they said change was okay, it was a quaint little town, and it still is today, just a lot wealthier. So how you approach the problems that the town faces will make a difference in the outcome. It's economic tension that changes a town, and it changes a town whether you're not or not you want it to change. And that's what you have to avoid if you
All right.
don't want change.
Thank you, Charlie. Okay, so the next question is, and we're going to ask Amanda, okay? What are the challenges you anticipate facing as a trustee, and how do you plan to address them?
Okay, so currently, the challenges that we, trustees of the trust funds, are facing are at legal right now. I discovered, and then later when other trustees were appointed by the select board due to resignations when I was elected, we discovered some funds that had been either depleted. I talked about the Scribner that we voted on. I think that might have been in 21 or 22. But anyway, that's been taken care of. We have the Scribner Library Fund. It's doing well. The trustees of the library have control over that, but gave it to us to keep it, managed, financially. But we also have 3 funds that have been at legal. 2 do not have the town's tax ID number on it. This is also complicated by the Green Grove Cemetery Trust, which is not a trust. It is in name only. I did a presentation on this to the Board of Selectmen several years ago about this. It's been at legal. This is a real mess because these perpetual care trusts that people set up, I researched it back to about 1906. During the 90s, they were all collapsed into one giant fund, but the amounts, the 32 individual amounts in them were never individually calculated. So this is a mess, and it's added to by the fact that, believe it or not, the town of Ashland does not own its town cemetery. Green Grove is a private cemetery, and the trustees of the cemetery that you might, elect on the ballot are not the same as the trustees of Green Grove. So we have all this cash of approximately $42,000 that we're trying to give over to
15
Green Grove.
seconds.
And that's illegal, and it's exacerbated by the fact that the MS-10, which governs this Green Grove, it's a form that goes to the state, had not been filed since 2007. So that's the challenges.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Oops. All right, next is Ann, and let me change it up for Selectmen. What are the challenges you anticipate facing as a select woman, and how do you plan to address them?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is trying to balance what the town needs while being mindful of what the taxpayers and the financial impact on the taxpayers. We always have difficult decisions we have to make and how to make them work for everyone. Being on the select board and also being Park and Rec director, I get to see it from both sides. So I see what the department heads need and what they're trying to do. But I also see the side where, well, we gotta keep this down. We gotta make sure it's good for the taxpayers because nobody here wants their taxes going up. They're up there high enough. So what we gotta do is we've gotta figure out a way to collaborate with everybody. Budget committee, everybody, anybody in town, we need to get together and do this together. We can't just do it as 5 people on a board or 7 on the budget committee. I think we need to work together, come up with ideas to help us without trying to break the bank. There are a lot of things we can do out there. There's a lot of places that will help us. There's a lot of grants and stuff out there that we need to get. We need to be looking at those more and trying to get the help that we can get because we do have one of the lower places on the map for money. So they're willing to give it to us, so let's go find it.
All right, thank you. Alan, what are the challenges you anticipate facing as a selectman, and how do you plan to address them?
Obviously, that's a very good question. This town is in need of new revenue sources to pay for the things that we need to fix or anticipate down the road. We don't know exactly what these things might be. We have a pretty good idea what some of them are because they have been identified. Right now, infrastructure is one of my main concerns. Utilities, water, sewer, electric, highway. These just cannot be paid through taxes because we will never be able to afford them. Like I say, it's a tough road. I'm sure that we could come up with some new ideas by getting people involved, which people have always stepped up at given times to do. But I'm about fixing the things that we have right now. It's great to look to the future, but you can't get to the future if you don't take care of what you have right now. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of that, but obviously we can do better. Thank you.
All right. Steve Felton.
Okay, challenges. The biggest challenge, and one of the reasons that I want to get back involved in the select board process, is we need to find a way to bring down the property tax burden in the town. We have to do that. And there's not a simple solution for that, but one of the key things that we have to be able to do is we need to be able to expand our property tax base so that we identify the properties that we have. And that's, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but in my head, and there's a plan on how to do that. But the first thing you have to do is, what's your current situation? What do you have out there now? What's your property zoned at now? What areas might we be able to develop businesses in to help spread that property tax base? So that's part one of it, bringing in new business, making sure that Ashland is marketed properly to attract new businesses, because we've got a lot of positives and we need to market ourselves effectively to get other people to understand that. We have to have a plan, and then we have to measure that success. And you know, plans change because things change when you're in a municipality, but making sure that we have a plan, we follow it, we measure our success. And I think this was mentioned by Ann and a couple of others. All of that doesn't happen unless you have collaboration between all the different departments. You've got the select board, the budget committee, economic development, getting the business owners in town more involved, get their perspective of how are they doing, what things do they think we need to maybe change. So putting all of that together and putting it into a plan and defining who's responsible for which pieces of it, and then measure success.
Okay, thank you. And let's see. Charles, what are the challenges you anticipate facing as a selectman, and how do you plan to address them?
The challenge here is, and building on my story, that Ashland is a town in economic tension, as the others have pointed out. There is no readily available additional revenue without creating tax burdens on people that become unacceptable, that will alter the town. I hear, from people, they said, well, we don't want this town to change. And I hear you, I don't want this town to change either, as I didn't want my hometown to change, okay? But I understand what made it change. And when you have economic tension, when the taxes are at a level that it's about the most people can handle, and yet, as Alan pointed out, we have, millions of dollars of infrastructure that needs attention, that's economic tension. And whether you like it or not, from my experience, it will change the town. Now, how do you fix that? You need to find revenue sources. Okay? You need to do things that are going to take the burden of taxation off the residents. fact that, and Lori pointed out, and I asked around, and I got the answer from Lori. I said, how much of the tax burden in Ashland falls on the residents? And it's around 80%. That's a very tax-heavy town for residents, and that is what has to be shifted. Now, the last master plan that we've come out with was dated 2012. It's the master plan that allows you to deal with the burden of taxation. Because if you have 80% taxation, you're burdened. The town I grew up in, when I told you it was
15
prosperous,
seconds.
it was 55-45. Industrial, commercial paid 55% of the taxes. We paid 45. It was a real easy town to live in that day, and that's what you need to adjust. Okay, if you can't get a big hit
Right.
on a revenue source,
Thank you,
you got to
Charlie.
manage the town.
Okay, and Stephen Heath. What are the challenges you anticipate facing as a selectman, and how do you plan to address them?
Well, it's pretty well been established that managing limited resources to deal with very complex issues like infrastructure and economic development. While I was fire chief, I dealt with the problems of dealing with this department and operating it on a limited budget. As our mission changed over the years from relying less on outside sources for ambulance, shifting to putting people in the station during the day and, other things, it was very difficult to balance the budget. And so we aggressively went after grants to compensate for that, so that we could also, at the same time, keep our equipment updated. We replaced all our protective clothing in 1 year. Another year, we replaced all the self-contained breathing apparatus, things of that sort. I'm not sure for other departments where grants would exist, but it's something that I think that we need to look into in order to help reduce the burden on the taxpayers.
Okay. So we're going to start with Anne Marie for the next question. And the next question is going to be, what are your long-term goals for the town, and how do you plan to achieve them?
So my long-term goal is to definitely get the taxes down where they are reasonable, because right now they're not. And to do that, like it has been said, we do need to get more businesses in here. And we have on the planning board, we have a list. We've gone through and found what properties are the town owns in town, which ones are for sale, different things like that, to try to find out which ones we can get a business to come in on. We're doing that to try and find that. We're also making sure that we don't put the burden on the town. We go out, I personally, Park and Rec, I've been talking to Grants, and right now, there's 3 things with the Park and Rec that need to be done, and they asked me to get estimates because they think it can be done. So if we can do that and get the booster club fixed, get the snack shack at the beach replaced, irrigation on the field, just by people coming and knowing that we need this stuff, and if you are out there and talking to people, they're willing to help. We do have a lot of people that have looked for grants, and I think we need to keep doing that. We also, maybe to get some businesses into town, we need to have some kind of incentive for them. The first year of a business is the hardest one. So maybe for the first year, we give them some kind of break on
15 seconds.
electric or, taxes or something. At least we'll be getting something in instead of nothing on that property. Thank you.
The next one, Stephen Heath. What are your long-term goals for the town, and how do you plan to achieve them?
Well, long-term, again, it's been said over and over, maintaining infrastructure, inviting economic growth, and, you know, in keeping what we have now, at least. And I think that my plan is, again, as we've also heard, is working collaboratively. We need to communicate with all the different groups in town and businesses and come up with some ideas. I'm sure that some people are aware of some things that others may not be. And you know, I think through that process, we can come up with some ideas that might help us out. You know, and you know, it's not gonna be easy necessarily, but again, we have to continuously work to reduce the tax burden on the residents.
Okay. Let's see. Amanda, what are your long-term goals for the town and how do you plan to achieve them?
So my long-term goals would be specifically with the funds that we trustees of the trust funds are accountable to and for. I want to make it very clear that all of the CRFs, the capital reserve funds that you all vote on for, am I okay?
You're okay.
Vote on at the ballot box to be taxed, to raise funds for paving a road or for maintaining buildings and things of that sort. Those are all very safe, very legally invested, very liquid, very fungible. We're good. There are the trusts that were set up, many of them in the 40s and 50s, to benefit things like the library scholarship funds, the Addison Scholarship Fund, which were not, that their appreciation versus interest was not taken into consideration, such that the funds today, our Addison Scholarship is $500, and we are crossing our fingers hoping we make that $500 every year because we are reinvesting capital gains so that there is appreciation, because we all know that the value of $1,000 today, ain't gonna be the same in 10 years, So we're trying to get these things to grow, and my long-term goal, I would love it if, we could see these various trusts, the Addison Fund for Scholarships, some of the library trusts which are illegal, those get out and those get back to where we can operate on them, and people can leave money to these funds, Memorial Park Fund, for example, in their wills, and continue to grow these trusts that are for the benefit of both the people, in this case of scholarships and the library, and also entities, the Blake Fund, that funds scholarships for the fire station here. That would be awesome if we had them so cleaned up,
15 seconds.
well invested, that people felt very comfortable leaving funds to grow this part of Ashland.
All right. I'm sorry, Alan, I skipped you. What are your long-term goals for the town and how do you plan to achieve them?
As I started to say before, it's going to be a tough situation. Taxpayers and ratepayers cannot afford the burden of what we're looking at down the road here. I've lived here all my life. I would like to think that wouldn't change. I'm speaking for myself, but I know other people here feel the same way. But it will come to a time, if we do not find things that can generate revenues to pay the bills, we're I don't know what's going to happen. One of the biggest problems is that we are a rental community, and that gets to be in an area that's very tough. Like it was brought up before, that 80% of the monies raised is from taxpayers or ratepayers. But unfortunately, all those people are not really taxpayers. They are renters. And I don't want to discriminate against those good people, and I'm not going to, but it is a fact. How do we help them out? I don't know. But their tax burden cannot be handled by a few. There's got to be another solution.
Okay. Steve Felton.
Okay, long-term goals. One of them I've already talked about, and I'm not going to go through it a lot again, but expanding the top property tax base is going to be critical. That's because that's one of the biggest ways that we're going to be able to spread that tax so it's not so onerous on each individual taxpayer. The other thing that we can do is, there are ways that we can increase our revenue beyond property tax. And some of them include being more collaborative with other groups within the state, whether it's developing better relationships with Lakes Region groups, the state, the federal government, local businesses, community groups. There's a lot of grants that are available. And I remember, again, back a number of years ago, when I was on the select board, one of the things when we went for grants that they were most insistent upon is, does the town have a plan that we can count on? So if we're gonna give you this money, are you gonna use it effectively? So that's when we ended up, creating the CIP, which is the Capital Improvement Program Committee. And most organizations like to see that, because that means you have a plan, it's driven from your master plan, and then you create capital reserves that allow you to plan for those long-term expenses that may be 3, 5, 10 years down the road. And the better you do with that, the more willing some of these different organizations are gonna be to give you the grant money. And that is a very effective way of creating significant revenue to help for some of the infrastructure things that we've been talking about. The last thing I'll mention then, because I haven't heard, 15 seconds, perfect. The last thing that I think is gonna be important is, as we do all this, years ago, when I was involved in it, we had what we call financial forums, and at the end of every year, the town would get together and have a forum like this,
Thank you.
where there might be 30 or 40 people.
Thank you. All right,
We're gonna do that again.
Charles. Charles, what are your long-term goals for the town, and how do you plan to achieve them?
It's all about the money, and that's the problem. Being on the select board, everything that comes before us is a question of, we need it, we want to have it, how are we going to pay for it? I'll give you an example, a new police station, a library, okay? These are things that the town should have, and they should be first class. We don't have first class, okay? And unfortunately, we don't have the money to make them first class without adding significantly to the tax burdens that already exist. So we need to be smarter about this. Now, there are two ways to approach this. One is what I call the big bang approach, and that's finding a revenue source, like we used to have with L.W. Packard, that is so prosperous that they can contribute to the town and begin to tamp down the economic tension, if you will. Now, the other way is the harder way, but it's the way that is prescribed is through master planning, okay? Once you know that 80% of the tax burden falls on the residents, it should become pretty simple. Well, okay, so where do we go from there? Well, let's look at what industrial opportunities they are for development. Let's look at commercial opportunities for development, and let's change the equation. Okay, we can't stay at 80%. If you add 10% more commercial businesses to the town, that means it goes from 80 to 70. You've got a 10% tax reduction, and you haven't done anything but invite some new people into the town. So that's the type of information we need to
15
work
seconds.
with. It's unacceptable to have a master plan that's 14 years old. It just is. The master plan defines who we are currently, and it provides the background for how we plan to make it better. And
All right.
that's the long-term process.
Thank you, Charlie. All right, now we're going to move on to questions from the crowd. I'm going to try to limit this to 30 minutes. And so I'd like to ask you to please provide your name and your address. And the question must be brief and must be addressed to the entire panel. And we're going to give each candidate 2 minutes to respond. And we're going to start with Alan, okay? So if anyone can raise their hand and provide a question, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Fran Newton, 54 Smith Hill Road. I know there's been, in the past, proposals for solar. I think it's something that, I personally think it's something that the town ought to look at, because energy costs, as we all know, are increasing. And this is something where we could provide our own energy. I'd like your thoughts on whether or not you have considered that, or would you consider that?
Yes, a very good question, Fran. Solar is an option. It is, the only thing of it is where are you going to put it? We have plenty of town-owned land, yes, we do. But is it feasible to do that without exploring other avenues that might be more advantageous money-wise? Yes, we've had probably 3 different firms, so to speak, companies, come to this town saying we can do this, 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 and this for you. But I've never been impressed, so to speak, of what we are going to get out of it. Solar is a great thing, don't get me wrong, but what are we going to get out of it? So in future presentations, I think we have to look at what the benefits are for us, not just for the company who wants to come in and put up solar.
All right, thank you. Steve Felton.
I think solar energy is a very viable alternative source of energy. I think it's something that as a town we need to look at. I think there's probably places to put it. One of the things we'll have to do is, obviously, the cost of solar continues to go down over the years. One of the things that we'll have to do is work with the electric department, because obviously, I don't know what you know about the electric department and how they get their energy, but we buy our energy, and we commit to a certain amount of energy over a set period of time. So as we introduce solar into it, we have to be in coordination with the electric department to make sure that the costs are coordinated with them and we're not hurting our overall electric department. But I think it can be done effectively in coordination with them, and it's certainly a very viable alternative moving forward.
Okay. Charlie.
Okay, I'm not a fan for a number of reasons. One of them is the commitment of land, of real estate to cover with the collectors that are necessary. And it's a relatively inefficient method of producing energy. It's generally subsidized. One of the issues I have is that, we don't allow, the state doesn't allow us to have net metering. And that's just unfair, because if everybody else has net metering, we should have it too. And that should, if the state's going to subsidize, solar energy, well, we all should benefit from that. And it just seems to be unfair the way that it's done. But that being said, I've looked at this carefully, and if you do the math on it, solar is not the answer to the future. The problem here in New England, in general, is that we don't have the pipelines of natural gas that everybody else has, or the rest of the country has. And that is what adds to the cost of most of the electricity generated here is through natural gas. And we need an inexpensive way of transporting that here so that we can enjoy the same benefits that the people in Pennsylvania have, for example. So, we need energy, but we're going to need a lot of it. And especially with the AI and the data centers that are coming with the new technology, solar isn't going to be the answer. And there are issues with solar because you've got the where do we get the solar panels from, overseas, and then when they wear out, what do you do with them? And so it's problematic, and I don't think that's our future.
Okay. Stephen Heath.
Yeah. I think before we turn away from the idea of the potential of solar, that we should explore it more and perhaps reach out to towns that have faced the same dilemma and look at what their solutions or how they arrived at it and how it's working out. There are, as you go across the country, you see places that have, solar arrays. And I think it would be worthwhile perhaps to reach out and find out what their experience was with it, what path they followed, and how that's working for them.
Okay. Amanda.
Well, as a trustee of the trust fund, I can say that if the town votes a warrant article to fund solar in whatever capacity that goes before the voters, then we will just be darn sure that when we're asked to pay for that check, that it aligns with what you voted on. That's our job.
Thank you. Anne Marie.
So I think we have looked at solar in the past. We've had some people come and give us presentations as a select board, and the numbers just didn't add up at that time for us to get the equipment, put it up, use the land, and still have it be beneficial to the town. But if there was a way to do that, then I think that would be great, because, you know, electric's not going down either, even though we have our own. But what we have to do is make sure we are on the right side of this. We make sure we don't take a hit with some of the people coming in and talking to us about it. So I would say we need to look at it, but we need to look at it carefully and make sure it works out in our favor.
Okay. Go ahead. Bob.
Thank you. I want to address the elephant in the room. We've all faced this problem, the Mill Pond project. The town is adamantly opposed to this Mill Pond project, which would inherently hurt the town of Ashland. It would have brought in many more people under the property level with no economic benefit for the town, and use up property that could be used for a benefit to the town. I'd like each candidate to tell us, the people who are going to be on the select board. Amanda, you don't need to get involved with this one.
If there's a warrant article.
But in the interest of saving time, each candidate tell us how they feel about projects such as this and how they would address them so that the town feels comfortable with the select board. Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to start off with Steve Felton.
Okay. I will just say this about the Mill Pond project. I don't know every detail of it. I know that we wanted to put a lot of housing there. Don't know that that's necessarily the best use of that land. One of the things we talked about before was expanding the property tax base. And there's not a lot of land in Ashland that can be developed for commercial, industrial things. So that could potentially be a piece that could be used for that. So as we look at expanding our property tax base, we look at sites like the Mill Pond area and say, okay, how can we use that to expand our property base? I mean, it's also right, the railroad goes right through there as well. So there's a lot of attributes that make that something that could be a piece of property that could definitely help our property tax base. So that's that, along with other properties we need to look at and figure out what's the best way to utilize that and work with the current owners and figure out what the best option is.
Okay.
Can I just say, as a select board member, I am not going to comment on this because there is a lawsuit for the town.
And I was asked to tell the public that we are in litigation over the Mill Pond project, and we have to be careful with what we talk about. Okay. So.
In fairness, I didn't say about the Mill Pond project, a project is like the Mill Pond project.
Okay.
What the future might bring. I think that's the fair question.
We just shouldn't reference Mill Pond project while we're in litigation.
Okay. All right. Charlie.
Okay, well, I'll add to that restriction because I'm still currently serving on the zoning board. And should, that become an item for the zoning board to deal with, I'll have to maintain neutrality and fairness. But that said, I will reference you to my story. It involves the town I grew up in, and I told you that there was an enormous project for high-density housing, okay, that completely changed the culture, the nature of the community. It was all-encompassing, and it turned the community into a different place. On the other side of the harbor, where they had a more revenue-positive approach to an industrial park. Well, it wasn't heavy industry, by the way. It was warehouses and some light manufacturing, but enough of it to make a difference. It made a difference. And I would also tell you that there was a zoning board decision made, one of the first decisions that restricted housing from being less than the town regulations required. Okay, we require a 750 square foot minimum housing rule, and there was a group that wanted less than that, and the zoning board protected the community in disallowing that.
15 seconds.
I'm done. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, Stephen Heath.
Well, in regard to that aforementioned project, I reviewed, I was, in the very beginning, I went over they submitted to me plans for roadways. So we had some input in that and so forth. They were very cooperative, and it really wasn't a big deal, but it didn't involve the housing. I never saw plans for structures or anything of that sort, but just where they were, the layout of the roads. Beyond that, I've heard nothing more. And, I do think, going forward, we identified that, increasing the property base, or it sounds like we're interested in single-family homes and smaller housing development, but but again, we have to look, as has been mentioned, we have to look at the land and see what the most appropriate use for it is going down the road. So I think, again, it just points out a need for the different boards, and the select board included, to work with, say, the planning board and so forth on these issues. And I know I follow what's going on. I look at you go online and get the minutes to see what's happening with it. But I think there are some complex issues that are going to take all of us to unravel.
Okay. Let's see, we meant 3. So we're going to skip over Amanda, because I think you've already answered the question, and Barney.
Well, I'm on the planning board and on the board of selectmen, so I'm not going to comment on the question, how it was asked, but I will say that I am in favor of anything that's going to help the town financially, and it's for us as a whole, the town, the boards, to figure out what that is, without saying too much about it.
Okay. Alan.
I'll make a very simple statement. I'm more or less, or I shouldn't say more or less, I'm against projects like this because it does put a definite burden on this town. We don't need any more housing that is subject to not meeting the full burden of what this town has to put forward to have these developments happen. I'm just going to leave it at that. I really have more to say, but I'm not going to. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. The gentleman in the back there.
Vito Lamontagne, 15 Summer Street. The town of Littleton was where we are today 40 years ago. They lost a lot of revenue because of the shoe industry just leaving the country. I'd be interested in hearing how each of you feel about maximize, you've all talked about expanding the tax base and stuff. I'd be interested in hearing how you feel about maybe having an effort to find, land in this town to have a business park or technology park, and also maximizing on whatever's available here next door at the Packard area. Thank you.
Okay, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's the core issue that we face, because that's the only thing that is going to elevate this town from the economic tension that it's under. And it's not going to be easy, because there are all kinds of what we can't, or we have to do this first and whatever to get there. But we can't let that stand in our way. We have assets in the town, and we have, let's just say, land that could become assets to the town if we were to act appropriately. And these are the initiatives that are going to make this town a better place to live, because they will reduce the economic tension, the tax burden, and they will also provide conveniences in many cases that we used to have in this town two decades ago, that just packed up and went away because it was no longer economically viable. So that, I think, will be something. Let me just say that we have an economic development committee. I think most of you know that. And I want to say that I played a role in reestablishing that committee and making it viable. And we have been discussing those types of things, and everyone should come out and discuss it with us and give us your point of view. But I'm hopeful that that committee will be the engine of ideas, received from the residents, that will, propel us to be able to deal with some of those thorny issues and create the motivation on the part of the town and the select board, the town managers, to bring some of those opportunities to fruition and move the town ahead. That's also the fastest way to the goal line. Thank you.
Steve Heath. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Pardon? Sure.
So Littleton is where we were 40 years ago, where they lost revenue from the shoe industry when they left the country. Okay, basically, what are we doing on expanding our tax base, or what do you plan on doing increasing our tax base, such as finding land for a business park and maximizing the mill property?
Boy. And currently, I think we have at least 2 vacant business things. I know when I was fire chief, I led numerous groups through the Packard Mill at their peril.
I remember.
And the town owns that, I understand, at this point. And I don't know, I've not heard anything about people showing any interest of any kind in it, so I know that at one point we had someone come look at the cost of taking it down. That didn't look like a viable option. It was going to be extremely expensive. So there it sits. And Mother Nature will decide the rate at which it comes down, I suppose. But something does have to happen. But again, we need ideas. We need people, entrepreneurs, if you will, who can come up with some ideas for how we might use that building. And we also have the Freudenberg, another space. How we can go about reaching out to people to occupy those spaces and, turn them into money earners. So that would be a goal, but Okay,
thank you. Should we skip you, Amanda?
Yeah, I just don't, if there's a warrant article,
We'll call you.
call me, that's my job, is to write the checks,
Okay. All right. Thank you, Amanda. Anne Marie.
So like I said earlier, I am on the planning board, and we are already starting this. Step one is we're making a list of all the property in town that the town does own that is empty, that can be used for anything at this point. So you've got to take it in steps, and we have started the steps. As far as the Packard mill, it's in rough shape. And we have talked about possibly getting a grant to take it down so that then we can work on putting something else in there, because it's not doing anything for us right now. So I think we have started by getting the places that we need. Then we need to find the businesses. And that's why I want to continue doing what I'm doing to try to get these things going forward. And there are things that are out there that we have done that we can't necessarily talk about because they're not finalized, but they're on their way. And I think you'll find that for a couple of the buildings that are in town now. You'll find soon that there's going to be some help out there.
Good. Okay. Alan Silly.
I'm going to stick with the mill. I'm not going to go out and try to identify other parcels of land to do what we need to do. We own a portion of the mill. We took it by tax deed. There's always been discussion of how bad shape it is. I've been through it more times than I want to tell you about. It does have potential, that's all I'm going to say. But we have some interested people that are looking to take over all of Lane's property, which, if that happens, it would be very advantageous to work with them on including the property that we own. And that's where I would try to move forward with. It's a valuable piece of property for somebody. It doesn't fit everybody's needs, but it's something that will work. I've got more opinions on it, but I'm going to keep it simple today.
Okay. And Steve Felton.
Good question, Bino. It goes back to expanding the property tax base. That's how you expand the property tax base. And we're saying the planning board is taking a look at the properties that the town already owns, and that is where you have to start. But beyond that, what other properties are there in Ashland that may be owned by somebody else that are zoned for commercial or industrial or retail? And how do we put that, let's get that map together to see what we have. And then we look at that and we maybe talk to the owners and we begin to prioritize which are the things that we can bring to fruition the quickest. And again, that goes back to, the CIP group, the Economic Development Group, and I won't get into this too much, but when I was a select board before, that's when we created the Economic Development Group, and it did pretty well. Bino was involved in it at that time as well. And then sometime after that, it kind of fell by the wayside, and now it's coming back into fruition. But that is more important now than it has ever been. But you need to do it methodically. You have to prioritize it, and then you would have to do it collaboratively with the different agencies and state, federal, and regional, so that we can collaborate and, instead of talking about it, actually making it happen.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah, Linda Burns, 49 Thompson. So Ann has mentioned being on the planning board, which I think is an extremely important role to have the liaison between the select board and the planning board. It's come up a couple of times that the town has been operating on a very old and outdated master plan. And just sort of for public transparency, the planning board is currently working, meeting by meeting, on reviewing the old master plan and updating it. I think our challenge is to make sure that people in the town know that, so that people come to the meetings and give their input, because it's gonna be a shallow thing if that doesn't happen. But what I would like to sort of put to the select board and select board candidates is, having the liaison is critical, but it's asking a lot for one person to have to carry, what are all the ideas coming from the select board? And so I would ask, how might members of the select board think about how you can pass along ideas, take some part in at least providing ideas for the planning board to consider with each chapter of the master plan. The other thing that the planning board does is review and propose revisions for warrant articles for zoning. And so if, and I think a lot of people don't know, but that's where that starts. The zoning board can't reset zoning regulations. The planning board does that. So if there are ideas about development in the town that might require zoning changes, that has to come to the planning board for us to be able to develop a proposal that then comes back to the town. Anyway, but going back to the master plan, I'd be curious as to how each of you thinks you might sort of not take responsibility for the master plan, but support the updating and, making the master plan reflect what the town does need.
Okay. We're going to start with Stephen Heath.
Oh, good.
Well, I think it goes back to something I mentioned earlier, and that is that more involvement, I think that even reflecting on my short time as an interim select board member is attend, and I got that when we had a joint meeting not too long ago, and that was quite informative, and I think that I would try to attend more of the meetings to be aware of what's ongoing, and and bring that back to the board or share with the board that weren't able to, whatever. But I just think as a board member, I should probably attend those kind of meetings, zoning and planning.
Okay. Ann Barney.
So expanding on what Steve said a little bit, it does help a lot when we have joint meetings, not just for planning, zoning. I feel like maybe we should set that up on a continuous basis, like the planning board and the board of selectmen meet on whatever day. And do that for everybody, because one person relaying things between committees and boards, sometimes things get missed. They can be changed a little bit, not heard the way everybody hears it. So I think if everybody is together and you hear it at once, that would be helpful. And that way, everybody in the town is also able to come and share their opinion. So that way you would have both boards, whether it be planning, budget, whatever, are together, and the town people are also there, so we get input from everybody at the same time.
Okay. Let's see. Alan Silly.
Very good question, thank you. And I'll just tell you, as part of my experience, I was on the planning board for 9 years. And this was part of, I want to say back in the good old days, but it's very tough to have one person to communicate to the select board what is going on. And as been stated, some things get lost in translation. But I think the way we have things set up, yes, we should have some kind of a liaison to be there at meetings. One of the biggest things is now the information for anybody that's looking up what's going on. You don't have to go to the minutes of the meeting, so to speak. We now have video of that meeting, which is very helpful for people to understand. And I think that's one of the main things that we need to continue and maybe do a little better. But having had that experience, communication is very key. So,
Okay. Steve Felton.
Okay, one of the words that you've heard mentioned a few times here today is the word collaboration. And that probably isn't more pertinent to anything than the master plan, because the master plan is what we should all be working from. And that collaboration, I think Ann mentioned it, we need to schedule meetings where the multiple groups are together so that everybody's on the same page. And I know that as the planning board is putting that, working with the master plan, what's the timeline? When do we want to have it done? What are the different steps to get there? How do we ensure that all the different departments are involved? And what tool, how are we going to make sure that the residents are involved? Because it's the residents, I mean, it's our master plan as a community. So what are the tools that we're going to do to make sure that we get community input up front? But bottom line is, there's nothing more important than collaboration on something like that, and you got to schedule it, and you got to have a process. So that's, I think, what we need to work towards.
Okay. And Charlie.
This is a failure of collaboration. The fact that we haven't updated the master plan means we're not collaborating. The selectmen are not working closely with the planning board, because it should be mandated that that master plan, the work gets done and it stays relevant. Now, there's a problem here that I've seen being on the board. It's that the planning board has a work requirement that is intense. And these are volunteers who don't get paid. Same for the Board of Selectmen, other than the marginal stipend that we get. That stops progress because people have to do the work, and there's a lot of work to do. Well, who works for free? Who has the time? Everybody has their own life. At some point, the town, where there is a staff of paid employees, is going to have to offer a hand to get some of this work done. I mean, there will be a cost to that, but I think that in order to make sure there's progress, somebody has to be given the assignment and held accountable for the assignment and getting it done. I want to also talk about the role of the Economic Development Committee again, because I think this is essential. We don't even see the Economic Development Committee is a subcommittee of the Select Board. It has no statutory authority. It is a discussion group, if you will.
15 seconds.
And we need to have that collaboration because the Economic Development Committee has the time to develop ideas, and it has the ability to bring residents in to discuss those ideas and develop them before they go to the selectmen.
So, do we want to take a 5-minute break and do closing statements, or do we want to just push through and do closing statements?
Could I answer this question slightly?
Oh, sure.
Just from my perspective, I know there's no warrant article, but I do want everyone to know, planning board, everybody, budget committee, et cetera, that the funds that we have in our various CRFs, there's a lot of them, that's all public information. Now, you know, this is complete public information. I share it with Marissa, who's our finance at the town office. I share it with her at least annually. Sometimes, you know, we just want to be sure our numbers are matching. She's watching it too, but she's watching everything else. And so sometimes she'll pop over and say, hey, Amanda, how much is in XYZ? You know, because that's our job. And all the balances for what we have set aside to do various projects in town is public information, as well as the balance in the trusts. I think we're down to about 6. That's all public information as well. Not that would affect, you know, any town issues. The trusts are, like I said, mostly scholarship and for the benefit of various entities like Memorial Park. But it's all public information. And so if planning board ever wants to know how much is in whatever, just let me know. I'll send you it over.
Okay. do we want to take a break and do closing statements, or do we want to just push through?
Let's go.
Send it, okay. All right, so, excuse me. So for the closing statements, we're going to give the candidates a 2-minute response, and we're going to start with Amanda.
Well, it won't take 2 minutes. So I'm glad that you all came today. It's always a pleasure for me to be able to explain to the town what the trustees of the trust funds do, because it seems to be this position that everyone just kind of, they don't dismiss it, but it doesn't seem to be on their radar as affecting them. And it really doesn't. We're just here as a counterbalance, a check on your vote, just to be sure that things are lining up and that the money's being spent as it should be spent, which, the town, as far as the CRFs go, does. We watch that. I have a file on my computer of all the warrant articles going back to all the different CRFs, so we can check it, and it's all good. But I also would just encourage people, particularly those of you watching that are not here, to think about becoming involved in town office with Ashland. It's not an overwhelming amount of work. All we need are people who care about Ashland, that are just willing to think and read things and think. You don't necessarily have to have super specialized skills, although, as I put out before, it would be nice if a CPA, a retired CPA, would like to become a trustee of a trust fund. That would be much appreciated.
Okay. Anne Marie.
So, everybody has had great ideas here. We know where the town needs to go. I think everybody has an idea that we need to get the tax rate down for the people, and we need to get businesses in here. We do have some things in the work that everybody probably doesn't know about because they don't go to all the different meetings. The meetings are on the website. You can come to the meetings. My door is open at the Booster Club. If anybody has any questions, let me know. People send me emails. You can let me know. Send me emails. My cell phone, my work phone, the Booster Club phone. Anybody that has any questions or comments or things they want me to bring up. Most of the people in town know me, so some just stop me and ask questions. I'm willing to hear anybody out. We need to keep going with the things we're doing. I want to keep doing the positive things for the town that I've been working on for the last 2 seatings at the select board. And I'm hoping that everybody will give me your vote. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Alan Silly.
Thank you. As like I say, some of the people know who I am, but this is for the people who don't. Like I said earlier, I've given 40 years to this town, and I'm willing to do a couple more. Just to reiterate what I'm talking about here, I've been on every board, every committee that has been. Planning board, ZBA, building committees, elementary building committee that lasted 8 years. I was on the first and last one. I became clerk of the works of that job. But one of the positions that I had was a water and sewer commissioner. And I will say that that's kind of one of the proudest points of what I'm going at. I had great people to work with. One of them is here today. 9 years I spent with water and sewer, getting it to where it was manageable, not perfect. It has a long way to go, but I believe it's headed in the right direction. One of the accomplishments that I feel that needs to be brought out even more is our septage receiving. It's a moneymaker. That started out as $30,000 in revenue, and through the great efforts of those commissioners,
15
is now
seconds.
almost an $800,000 a year revenue. And those are the things that I can bring to the board if I'm elected. Thank you.
Stephen Felton.
Okay, first, thank you again for all of you for spending your time and interest in being here to listen to this. Very much appreciated. You heard what each of us said today. The only thing I'm going to add to my closing comments is, in addition to the experience that I've had within this town in different roles, again, I retired recently, and some of the skill sets that I've learned during those years is one that I think is really important, really good listening skills, management skills. I do a lot of marketing. I was division manager for a number of different companies. I owned my own business and ran it for a number of years. I was involved in commercial real estate. I've got some budgeting skills and plan and skills on developing strategies and plans for different initiatives. So put it all together, and I feel like I could benefit the town, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Charlie.
I told you that story, and I went out of my way, to get that in. Because to me, I don't want you to know what my opinion is. We all have opinions. I want you to know who I am, civically at least. I mean, it's nothing personal in this. Personally, I'm a nice guy. This is different, okay? Civically, I am angry, okay? Just like some of you, I never intended to leave my hometown, okay? And because of that tension that I told you about, the economic issues, not only did I have to leave my hometown, my children had to leave my hometown, and most of my friends have left my hometown. And that's a very unhappy experience. And I came here, and the reason I landed in Ashland, because people are always asking me that, because it looked like the town that I grew up in when I got here. And I had no intention to get involved here in any civic activity. I came here to be retired, okay, and enjoy the back end of my life. It was only when I realized that what I saw here was deja vu all over again. Here's a town thrashing the same issues that, were what unraveled the town I grew up in. And so that kind of motivated me to participate and get involved. And it is who I am that I will do my best to remedy that situation. Okay. Now, I think this is the point of the speech where I'm supposed to say,
15
and vote
seconds.
for me because I'm the best. But I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to tell you is, you know who I am. Okay? If you agree that we need to make progress with this town and make it a better place to live, then you vote for me. Now, if you really want to supercharge the process,
All right, thank you, Charlie.
vote for me and two other like me.
Okay.
And it will move.
Stephen Heath.
Thank you. Again, I'd like to thank everybody for being here. I think and as I stated earlier, that I would wish for this kind of attendance at meetings. I know it's available online. I know that you can sit in the comfort of your home and watch what's going on and so forth. But I think it is a lot more meaningful when citizens of the town get together and hear ideas, because I've even seen some people conversing with each other during this. So, I mean, that adds an element to it that makes it more beneficial to everybody. Again, in my time in town, since 1990, I've been a member of the fire department forever. This is why you saw me jump a little bit when the tone just went off. Old dog, old trick. And, so getting to know a lot about the town and the people in the town, it's just, it's been a great experience, and I want to continue to serve this community that I love very much.
Okay. Well, thank you for participating, candidates, and thank you, public, for participating. I'm going to end this meeting. Thank you.